King and Queen are in the country. They're due to meet with the President and the First Lady shortly this morning, at the beginning of their 4-day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yes, 4-day visit to Nairobi, state visit. And the Kenya Human Rights Commission is saying what we want from the King is nothing short of an apology for what happened in the colonial days. As City and Du are asking, what specifics are these that we are seeking? Do you have a list of saying, so, number one, apologize. Once you apologize, two, now show us where Dedan Kimathi is, bring Orkoyot, show us this and the other. Is there a list of the things that you want as part of the reparations and everything that comes with the apology? Or are we just saying apologize and then we shall now figure out what else we want?
Of course, when you look at one of the things that we're recommending, apart from the unconditional public apology, we are seeking for support in documentation and bringing back the repository of all the things that the British took away from Kenya. It's very important as part of documentation for all these atrocities, which is currently lacking because of most of these things were taken and kept safely in British. We've seen this even recently in the DRC when some parts of late Patrick Lumumba was brought back. These are the kind of things we are talking about. Apart from that, reparation of victims is something that must be looked at. Of course, because of the Mau Mau out-of-court settlement with the British, it's only a small section of people who are compensated. But as you know, the list is wide, and there are people who still feel they were not represented in this case. So that also opens up an opportunity for a comprehensive discussion and a possible compensation.
Do you know how many people are not represented or were not represented?
What we know is that the Mau Mau case only represented around 5,000 people. Or at least the only people who fought,
how many
who were affected.
How many should be not?
I think, without necessarily giving the number, we need to widen the scope, because we strongly feel there are quite a large section of people who are affected.
So this is my problem, Cornelius.
Yes.
That we seem not to have our list of demands crystallized. What we want is the word sorry from King Charles, and then thereafter we don't know what to do with it. If we are seeking an apology so that we then move in towards getting proper justice for what happened in Kenya, we need to have that list. Are we seeking an apology and then we say, now from the first time when we had this Crown Land Act, apologize for that, and let's... If we don't have all these things aligned, what are we seeking an apology for?
Or is it possible to seek some of these things then without this apology? Because these fellas have just about told you that they're not going to apologize. Number one, they've said, look, if we tell you, if we actually utter the words "I'm sorry," what this does is that it opens a whole can of worms that then they're not ready to deal with legally. Because can you imagine the countries of the Commonwealth who will say, you apologize to Kenya? Okay. Even you must do it here and here and here. They're not ready to deal with that legal thing. So they've more or less said, well, you know what? An apology doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I think in the back of our heads, we know, right? This apology is long. It's not, it's
unless we push them to add it.
So is it possible then for this list of things that we're hoping up an apology will bring about, can we jump to the list of things and now start demanding some of these things? Because they've acknowledged at some point that yes, they were responsible for it. Is there a mechanism, for example, that would be in place to say, now let us start demanding some of these things? Because is it necessary for somebody to tell you sorry before we know that they did it? We know, for example, the reparations are being chased after. Can we not continue chasing after them? We know that we're looking for a return of certain things. I know in Nigeria we're looking for return of quite a number of things that the British took away from Nigeria. Do we have to wait for you to say sorry before we come after you for them? We're also looking to say, tell us where certain things are that would be important to us for our history. The remains of Dedan Kimathi, for example. Return them. Why do you have them? Is it not possible for us to have some of those conversations and start to push on some of those angles? because we're waiting for them to say sorry for something that they've already told us, arrogantly, if anything, that they're not going to apologize because it is more trouble for them to apologize. But can we not say, all right then, hold on to that apology, let's start chasing some of these things? Is that possible?
Okay, that could also be a way, but if you look at the norm here, it's very important sometimes, even beyond this compensation, the acceptance and the victim feeling that somebody felt that they wronged them. It's very important.
Okay.
But even getting to the complete, it's a process. It's not just something. There are challenges that we've had with even getting some of this information for reasons best known to the colonizers.
You know, and I'm coming back here. My problem with this conversation is it seems to be running ahead of itself. Okay? So you've mentioned here a number of times that you'd like the communities that were wronged would like to hear the apology directly from the king, so then they see what to do with that apology, whether to accept it or to tell him to his face, no, right? And then to say, this is what we want in return. Yes, you've apologized, but we want to know, what did you do with our Okoyot? Yes, you've apologized, but we want to know where is Dedan Kimathi. Yes, you've apologized. We want to know where are our artifacts. Some of these things that were good, what crucial for us. They were religious items for us. But I'm not hearing that from the Kenya Human Rights Commission. If the Kenya Human Rights Commission were genuine in their demand and in this long letter, then the Kenya Human Rights Commission would be saying, this is what we've done. This is what we are working with the communities, and this. We are saying that the community that was wronged here is ready. The community here is ready, and they are seeking, their apology is specific. We are seeking an apology for what you did to Mekatilili Wamenza. We are seeking an apology for what you did to our Orkoyot. We are seeking an apology for what you did to our people by pushing them out of Laikipia and pushing them down. We are seeking. This is not what I'm hearing from you. You are not organizing anyone. You're just coming out to say we want an apology. It's like you're seeking publicity, Kenya Human Rights Commission.
Not really. That's not the position.
But
The issue here is that we are not supposed to occupy the space for the victims. We provide a platform for the victims to be heard. This apology, when made to the right people, it will provide a platform and a framework for some of these things to come out clearly. So it's not in our space to consolidate everything, but we will be able to facilitate that process at the right time. And we're already doing a lot. We are already doing a lot because you already know that we've worked closely with the Mau Mau, and there's been some significant gains. There are a number of people who have also reached out to us, and we are willing and are already providing support. So if you wanted all this captured in the letter, then I think that will be quite ambitious.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I just want you to say that, we've organized these communities and this and the other. This is what this community is seeking an apology for. You worked with the Mau Mau, like you've said, yes, right? Especially in the case that was taken to the UK, you are supporting the Mau Mau. When the British government, through their foreign secretary, went to Parliament and made this public acknowledgement and expression of deep regret for what happened, thereafter, there was an out-of-court settlement with this group of Mau Mau. The Kenya Human Rights Commission was working shoulder to shoulder with the Mau Mau then. So you accepted that a statement of expressing deep regret was good enough for that group of Mau Mau. Why would you expect that you would expect anything different? If you accepted deep regret, Kenya Human Rights Commission, then why are you seeking an apology today? What's changed?
Or is it because we've seen other countries like the Dutch? The Belgians also apologized. Their Prime Minister, Charles Michel, apologized for kidnapping mixed-race children during the colonial rule in Burundi, Congo, and Rwanda. But I'm sticking with the Dutch for a reason. This process, which now, when we got to 2022, it wasn't the end. In 2016, they have a minister who actually apologized and said, something, They didn't start this apology just 2016 is when the first apology came. 2022 now, King, Prime Minister speaking. This year, okay, this very year, the same king went further, apologized for slavery, and said the Dutch involvement. They were marking 160 years since the slaves were freed in Belgium. He apologized and said, we are wrong. Don't skirt around it. So when we talk about an apology, are we talking about an apology for imperialism? Because imperialism is what brought about these problems. Are we saying, and are we looking at this thing deeply and saying, you know something, this legal issue that we're talking about, are we justifying imperialism and saying the colonizers had a right to brutalize, to harm people, to do what they did in the name of colonizing? Because was it legally accepted? There's a moral issue to it, but it appears that if you don't apologize, then you're saying there's nothing wrong with imperialism. So what you do is you apologize for specific acts. Those acts represent imperialism. That is what brought about that. So
Gee, let me ask you.
Ask me, please.
The example that you're giving us, the Dutch.
Yes.
How did we arrive at the king apologizing? Was it the people who were wronged, who were demanding an apology, or was it the Dutch leadership feeling, you know what,
okay,
it's the 21st century and we are more human than our predecessors. Let's apologize. Did they do it out of their own volition?
The demand had been there for some time, and there had been denials. Again, the reason why that research took place because people figured, this is the official position. They were actually justifying imperialism and saying there was a war, maybe there was some, we needed to misled people, we needed to contain. They were justifying it, and they were saying colonialism and its atrocities were justifiable by the laws. Then an institute decided, no, let's research this thing properly.
An institute of?
And in Holland, a Dutch institute.
Of the Dutch?
Yes.
Not of the victims?
Nope. And they say, guys, you've got it wrong all along. This is the reality.
Okay.
And they confront the government and say, this is the reality.
How do we know this institute was not working for the government all along?
I have absolutely no idea.
All right. Did the victims place a list of demands and say, this is what we want? We want an apology, followed by this, followed by the other. Or did this institute do this research and then come out and say, you need to apologize and then you need to do this?
Research institutes tend to seek to answer a question.
Yes.
There are all these claims about atrocities that were committed by the Dutch, not just in Indonesia, but also in the Caribbean. Okay?
Yes.
Now, this is what they're saying, and it's historical. And we are a historical research institute. This is our history. Let's look into it. And they looked into it, and this is what they came up with. By the time their king was apologizing openly and saying, the other apology, let's leave that on the side, we've already apologized, but for slavery and our role in it, we are apologizing. Meaning, they are not just apologizing for one event, they are apologizing for imperialism and everything that went with it. And it is not a half-measured apology. They're saying, we apologize. Please, and even as utters the word, please forgive us.
Then who determines the reparation and the value of the reparation?
Now, that is usually a subject of discussion now. Okay, this is what we'd
process.
like. This is
It's a process.
Yes, this is what we'd like. This is what we think would be adequate.
This is what we
You may make an offer, but they'll say we don't. Now, if you want to understand it, Macron, when you talk about the occupation of Algeria, they said, this apology, forget it, man. What we need to do, okay, we're not going to apologize. Because these apologies, sometimes they mix up things and they get things confused. No, we want to work into the future. How do you work into the future if you haven't sorted out the wrongs that were there? So, attitude change, views change. That's Macron's position.
The issue that I'm raising actually is on, if we just demand an apology and then let the person who's apologizing then determine the next steps.
We should be clear about what it is, the package we want in this apology.
When they went to Parliament after the pressure with the support of Kenya Human Rights Commission and the firm of Lady and the others, when they got the pressure, they went to Parliament and they said, we acknowledge, we deeply regret. And that opened the door for the British government to start negotiations out of court settlement with a group of Mau Mau.
Very true.
All right? They were running the program. And that's why I'm asking the Kenya Human Rights Commission.
They were controlling the narrative.
You accepted that. Why aren't you accepting that and then following it through with everybody else?
You accepted
Why
regret.
do you want more? You already accepted the regret. Why are you saying the regret is not enough today?
Of course, you must understand that it was an out-of-court settlement with a particular group, the Mau Mau. Were the Mau Mau the only people who were affected?
No, they were not.
Why are you locking out a room for an apology
And why
to other groups?
So are we saying the opportunity of having the king visit is the opportunity that you've now seen as an appropriate time to bring this up? Has this thing been brewing? Have you been thinking, we need to? Because remember, this is the problem of having a huge empire like the British. The Indians have their own issues. There was one Prime Minister, Cameron, who tried and dodged. You know this? It's a thorny, touchy issue. And there's always a question of what next? Do you think the Dutch model of apology
Works.
or the German apology, do you think it is the way to go? Because clearly some of these colonizing nations don't think so.
I think this is a right opportunity, and the fact that the king has an opportunity to speak to the Kenyan people, not to Kenya Human Rights Commission, is an opportunity for him to speak to the victims and issue this apology. And if there are opportunities which are guided by the UN framework, so be it. There will be mechanisms for reparations. So I don't think we're asking for too much. Neither are we seeking for publicity. We're just asking what is rightfully Kenyan. And the opportunity is here. What other opportunity? We can't go to the UK to go seek for this apology. The king has come. And we will be speaking to other things as much as we are also seeking for this apology.
So there's a possibility of two things. There's a possibility that this pressure that has come, the agitation, that over the next 4 days, there's a possibility that he will stand behind a microphone and say, I'm sorry. There's also a possibility that he will not. So what are we going to do if he says, or if he doesn't acknowledge? What happens thereafter?
That will not stop us from agitating for the UK government or the British rule to do the right thing. As you know, agitating for human rights is a continuous process. The opportunity has presented itself. It doesn't happen now. We still continue agitating and working with these communities in a way that ultimately will enable them to realize what is right for you. So I think this should be seen as a process. And even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't stop us, because after all, we've been in this for a very long time. And we've had gains and we've had challenges along the way.
Do you think that the colonizer also benefits from this apology?
Of course, it's part of a reconciliation, because it's, from a moral point of view, it's an acceptance, and it creates an opportunity for opening a new front of now working on the ills to ensure that there are necessary legislative or legal frameworks or reforms that ensures that this is not repeated again. As you all know, even after the colonization period, we still have some elements of things that are happening in this country that shows that these things are being repeated in different forms. Yeah.
So if we take this to present-day Kenya, then, if we feel that we've had successive governments who have misruled us, should they also apologize to us?
They should. And I think when you remember the statement by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, he did allude that there's a fair share of responsibility on the part of the Kenyan government, which he did apologize. And the same thing also happened with the CJ Mutunga. Yeah.
What's the next course of action? So the king is here. You issued a statement before his arrival and you said, this is what we want. We'd like this from the king. Are you seeking to have your letter delivered to him? Are you seeking audience with him? Or was that publicity, just the publicity enough to raise the awareness and to send a message to him? And then once he leaves on Friday, what next?
You know, one of the recommendations is that we are open to a possible discussion, but more importantly, to avail an opportunity for the victims. This is something that we can work through to ensure that the victims get a space. So for us, it was not about us and the king. It was about the victims and affording them an opportunity to engage in a balanced space whereby they can also express their grievances and get these apologies and whatever comes with it.
Is there one repository of information where we know these are the victims of the atrocities and these are the injustices that are committed?
Of course, we've listed them, as I did indicate when we started here, is that there are several things. We are talking about the political repressions during the colonial rule. We are talking about the land alienation. We are talking about the gross human rights violation committed by the British corporates, and even you still see them happening in a number of corporates owned by the British. And we feel this is another form of neocolonialism, because there are several atrocities that are being committed in the so-called conservancies, in the so-called British corporates, when you look at the issues around the mountain and many other things. So there are a whole list of things that we are seeking apologies for.
Cornelius, thank you very much for joining us today. Cornelius Odor is the Deputy Executive Director at the Kenya Human Rights Commission. 9